Royalty. Royalty.
Shalom, shalom. Today we're going to look at the woman's menstrual cycle. I get emails about this and I wasn't necessarily neglecting it. I just wanted to gather information, look at some historical sources, and give you guys the best that I can give you, because when we're dealing with stuff that has to be carried out or practiced, you don't want my opinion, you don't want somebody else's opinion, you want the truth. And so I'm kind of going to break this into maybe 3 phases, not 3 videos, just 3 phases of the video. The first thing, we're just going to deal with scripture. We're going to read through what scripture says, and then we'll move on into those Hebrew words that are used, and then finally we'll move into some historical information, how curses play into this, the miseducation through feminism, and then kind of let you guys conclude at the end. Oh, and we'll also obviously make a connection to the Brit Kadishah and the Hamashiach, because obviously we know that there's a connection with everything. So move in that form. Okay, so we're going to start in Leviticus chapter 15. So Leviticus 15:19. And it says, "If a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And whosoever touches anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And if it be on her bed or on anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until the even. And if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed whereon he lieth shall be unclean. And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanliness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. Every bed whereon she lieth, all the days of her issue, shall be unto her as the bed of her separation. And whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean as the uncleanliness of her separation. And whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. But if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number to herself 7 days, and after she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take unto her 2 turtles, or 2 young pigeons, as turtle doves or young pigeons, and bring them unto the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her before Yahuwah for the issue of her uncleanliness. Thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanliness, that they die not in their uncleanliness, when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. This is the law of him that hath an issue, and of him whose seed goeth forth from him in the defile, and is defiled therewith, and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that is an issue of the man, and of the woman, and of him that lieth with her that is unclean." Okay, so because I read through the end part, obviously most people, when they deal with this picture of Niddah is the Hebrew word, or separation for the woman, immediately it's viewed as something that is disgusting and something that makes her defiled. And there's a difference between defiled and unclean. And we see here at the end that obviously starting just with the woman can make you feel kind of weird as a woman. Like, okay, Most High, you gave me this thing, and then I'm the only person that has to do this. I'm the only person that has to be separated if something happens. And so one of the things I want to point out by first reading it out of context, out of its, not from the beginning for sure, is you can view something and it can be very one-sided. And some things are male and some things are female, but we have the tendency in our culture to view the menstruation of a woman as vile. But what we're going to read a little bit earlier is that it's not whether it's vile or gross, or it's the issue of unclean. Clean yourself, okay? Let me read you the first part and show you that the same prohibition is actually given to the men for his own emissions, okay? Which happen a lot more frequently than the woman's cycle, might I add. So starting at chapter 15, verse 1, and Yahuwah spake unto Moshe and Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When any man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue he is unclean. And this shall be his uncleanliness in his issue, whether his flesh run with his issue, or his flesh be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanliness. Every bed whereon he lieth, that hath the issue, is unclean. And everything whereon he sitteth shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth his bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And he that sitteth on anything wherein he sat, that hath the issue, shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And he that toucheth the flesh of him that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself, and be unclean until the even. And if he that hath the issue sit upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And what saddle soever he rideth upon that hath the issue shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth anything that was under him shall be unclean until the even. And he that beareth any of those things shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And whosoever he toucheth that hath the issue, and hath not rinsed his hands in the water, he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And the vessel of earth that he toucheth and the vessel of earth that he toucheth, which hath the issue, shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in the water. And when he hath an issue and is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take to him 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons, and come before Yahuwah unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them unto the priest. And the priest shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before Yahuwah for his issue. And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water, and he shall be unclean until the even. And every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water, and be unclean until the even. The woman also with whom man shall lie with seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water, and be unclean until even. So you can see here that this is not some like, oh yeah, so mean, and he's doing this thing to the woman, and it's not even that kind of situation. Obviously, the same thing goes for a man if he has an issue in his flesh, and also for men when they, have the seed of their copulation, the scripture says, come out from their bodies. The woman is unclean until even. So this idea of being unclean until even, we spoke about, is 2 things. A cultural thing, obviously, because if you were you bathed at a specific time. Everybody wasn't just out in the middle of the day bathing. Excuse me, I have my allergies. It's just that time of year. So you can see that this wasn't something that was just specific to the woman. She's the only person nobody can touch, and she's so vile and she's so disgusting. So I really want to point that out before we kind of went any further in our study. So let's deal with menstruation. Menstruation is a natural biological process that women undergo during a very major period of their life. And menstruation is linked to fertility and motherhood, and is something that is closely associated with entering into a new phase from being a girl to a woman. It's not something that should have a negative stigma placed upon it. One of the things I want to deal with, because we know this is a natural process, is the fact that Yah knows it's a natural process also. So anytime he sets up a law, it's not to hurt us, it's not to hurt the family, it's not to hurt our children. So we want to look at these Hebrew words, and then we'll get into the questions of where should I sleep, how long should it last, and you heard me read it, but I want to actually set it out concretely. How long does it last? When is it over? what does it represent in a spiritual sense, and then how changing our viewpoint of our cycles can also positively affect our psyche as we go through that purification process, and also how we can pass on a positive image of the natural functions of the female body to our Hebrew daughters, so that we can break these cycle of curses that are attached to our natural functions. Okay, so I'm going to turn the screen that way. Okay, you can't see me, but I'm still here. So there are pretty much two main Hebrew words used in these verses. If you don't understand what's happening here, I really, really suggest that you go through the whole book of Leviticus, because there's some things set in place, not as punishment or for bad reasons, but because of the protection of the cleanliness of a camp. Remember, you had 600,000 men plus women and children who exited from Egypt. If we just give every one of those men one wife, that's 600,000 women who are going to, at various times throughout the year, well, monthly, of course, in a regular sense, have cycles. And so if these women are having these cycles, we need to know what to do, in obviously in close quarters too. We can't have people just handling, their bodily fluids and their uncleanliness in a way that will defile the camp, because remember, Yah was dwelling in the midst of them in the tabernacle in the wilderness. And so, not to say that we don't have to still do these things, I'm going to prove to you that we do, but a lot of these things was because people had to come to tabernacle and people had to do certain things, and Yah was about the cleanliness of his people, setting a standard of cleanliness to keep disease down. Remember, there wasn't a lot of disease outside of disobedience and plagues that came through the camp for our people. And when diseases did arise because of various reasons, then they had to be dealt with in a way that could preserve the lives of the other people. Okay, so the word in verse 19, and if a woman have an issue, I'll give you a bunch of these. So an issue is the word zub, zayin, vav, bet. Okay, zayin, vav, bet, or wa, bet. It means to flow, gush, discharge, a sword for cutting away. Vav is to divide, and bet from the house. So this issue or this gush is going to cut or divide one from the house very easily. Not necessarily from outside of the house. It means from the people. The bed is not always just a physical house, but it's also that which dwells within the house. I know we've dealt with that before. So let's look at it. And it means it's the idea of harvesting. So it literally deals with this idea of the food of the house. It also deals with hyssop. It's the thing that is used obviously to purge of uncleanliness. Okay. It also has a color. So this issue could also be some kind of sexually transmitted something, or an infection, or it doesn't have to always be sexually transmitted, but it can be an infection. Women get yeast infections, they get any of these things that causes an issue. It actually gives a color, and it says either a yellow discharge or pus. I'm giving you really specifics here. So an issue can be not just a cycle, but anything that happens down there that causes you to need to cease or stop or separate yourself from someone else, obviously, so you don't pass it on, and also because it's gross. Okay, nobody wants you touching your privates and touching them, or leaking that stuff on something and touching, and you need to wash your clothes. It's funny because a lot of reasons why a lot of issues occur is because of uncleanliness, not washing or bathing properly. So one of the prescriptions for all of these things is to bathe yourself. Okay, so we have this. It literally deals with yeast, which is very interesting. Okay, so this means this is the word for an issue. Okay, and this can happen male or female, the flow or flux, from flux. from the body. Okay, an issue of the flesh. Basar, it literally means the body, be the male organ or the female body. And so the next word we're going to look at, and let me just clear this off. And I'll make it a little darker this time. Okay, the next word we're going to look at is she shall be put apart, right? 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her. So this idea of put apart is the word Niddah. Nun, Dalit, Hey. And this word means impurity, filthiness, menstruation, and impurity of ceremonial impurity of menstruation, an impure thing. Okay, so we're going to look at this word. If you have your ancient Hebrew lexicon, it's going to be number 1303, and it literally is a picture of a seed and the picture of the Dalit, and it allows the movement back and forth through the tent. So it means to continue back and forth, or back and forth movement. Now, why is that connected to the cycle? Well, seed goes in, right? And if there is no fertilization of the egg, then the egg and the lining of the uterus then come out. Now, obviously, we know that seed does not have to go in for menstruation to happen, because every girl that has a cycle before she's sexually active obviously is not experiencing that. So the word literally means the removal, something that is removed or thrown out. So what is thrown out? The unfertilized egg is thrown out of the body when it is found to be unfertilized, and the lining of the uterus is shed. So it literally means something that is removed or thrown out. And so, yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Some people translate it as say it's connected to the woman because a menstruating woman is removed from the camp. Okay, so obviously removed from the camp in the sense that she stays in a particular place, and we'll get into that a little bit more. In the context of the text, obviously it seems like it is her home. She's not carrying around her menstrual pillow and all of these things with her all over the place. Okay, if you have the handout, there's some more words on there, but I'm going to give you these two in this video, so you can actually look a little more into them later in your own time, just so I don't keep you forever. Okay, and so she's supposed to be set apart 7 days. Trying to make sure I get all the Hebrew words out of the way. And whoever touches her shall be unclean. So the Strong's number is 2930, and it's translated here as tomei or tomei. It means to be unclean, become impure, to become unclean sexually, religiously, or ceremonially. So let me give you this word on here. And it's tet. So separate, mem, waters, olive. And that's like the head person first, chief. So like it means to become unpure. So water means motion. So it means to defile. It can be sexually, religiously, or ceremonially. And it's something that is pronounced impure or unclean. Okay? And so we're going to look at this idea of the issue of blood and how long it goes. So remember, a woman from the time she notices blood begins to count 7 days. At the end of the 7th day, she bathes. So, give you a little bit more practical. So for me, at the end of my 7th day, I bathe, of course. And the bathing point is important because most people go, oh, okay, I'll just shower. Bathing is important because in bathing, you immerse yourself in water, okay? And bathing, and especially when you add certain things to the water, bathing removes and allows the body to purge or release anything that may be remaining or lingering. Showers don't do that. Shower runs water over the outside of your body, but you really need to immerse. It's part of it. I use in my water when I am doing my bath at that time hyssop and cedar wood. And I'll explain to you why in a little bit. Because there are some connections. Hyssop is a purger, and cedar wood is an antiseptic. Okay, so I'll also add the properties for hyssop and cedar wood to the information portion of this video. Okay, the next question that I get a lot of is, can I sleep in the same bed as my husband while on my cycle? Okay, so let's look at the scripture. It says, every bed whereon she lieth all the days of her issue shall be unto her as a bed of her separation. And whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean as the uncleanness of her separation. And whosoever touches those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. Okay? Verse 23, it says, and if it be on her bed, or on anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until even. And if it be on her bed, or anything wherein she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean to evening. Okay, so obviously this deals with the fact that the actual blood is upon something and this person touches it, okay? It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm cut off from the people forever. Now, there is something that'll get you cut off forever. We'll read it. But it just says, okay, wash yourself. You're unclean till even, okay? 24, and if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him. Okay, here we go. So this idea of it being on her bed, you touch her bed, and it gets on you, you're unclean. So it says, if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed whereon he lieth shall be unclean. So if a man lies with a woman, or if you guys sleep together, in the sense of laying in the bed together, I'm talking about sex. If you sleep together, and that blood gets upon your spouse, then your spouse is unclean 7 days. So what could be just, a few days of separation due to you being on your cycle could turn into more days of separation if you guys decide, okay, yeah, we'll sleep together and the blood gets on him, then it can prolong the issue. I think that's where this whole idea of you sleep over here, don't even sleep in the bed, it's bad enough that we're separated sexually from one another. But then for me to then in turn be separated and be unclean and not be able to enter the tabernacle and not be able to carry out normal functions is also obviously a negative. So not just unclean 7 days. Not just unclean till even, but if the blood gets on this person because they decided to lay in the same bed as this person, then it makes it 7 days for him from that day forward. And, So those are some things. But does it say emphatically, no two people cannot touch a person? You're going to die if you touch a person. You're cut off from the congregation of the people if you touch a person. That's not what it says. It means a person will be unclean to even, and it means the idea of ceremonially unclean and unclean for camp, unclean for community. Okay, you don't want to be passing around your germs. But does it mean that this person is forever just a terrible person? Has nothing to do with morality as much as it has to do with cleanliness. The next thing I get is children. Well, can my children touch me? Can my children? Obviously, then your children fall into the same category. But you have to think about it. The mother in the home was a primary caregiver of the children. So her separation directly affected them kind of anyways, especially like you have people who have nursing children. I've heard of people pumping milk because they don't want to nurse their baby because they don't want their baby to be unclean. That's not what the Most High is dealing with here. You have to realize you don't want to interject into scripture things that are not there. So is he saying, I can't hold my baby, I can't touch my children can't touch me? Oh, no. Like, obviously it has whenever there's a law set up, there's also a thing in that law that allows that law to be fulfilled. And if that law is in any way violated, obviously there's something to do to remedy the violation of that law. So the law of separation obviously has with it the remedy for what happens when you come in contact with these things, because the reality is the Most High knew that during this time there would still be interaction of some sort between the family. Like, okay, you're unclean till even, but bathe yourself and then you're unclean. So you bathe so that you don't pass on your uncleanliness, okay? So the fact the person bathed means they're not going to pass it on to the other people who come in contact with them. Does that make sense? Okay, next I want to throw out some food for thought about this idea of, can a person touch a person when they are unclean, or when they're on their cycle, or when they're in their time of separation due to an issue of blood. I want to look at this story of the woman with the issue of blood. And the reason why I want to look at this is because, is it the idea of the actual blood, or the things that blood are on touching the person, or is it the actual person touching someone else that makes them unclean? Because I know people are like, well, can I touch anything? Anybody touch me? You know, that whole thing. So in Luke chapter 8, when it starts at verse 43, it says, and a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him, talking about Yahushua HaMashiach, and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood staunched. And Yahushua said, who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude thronged thee and pressed thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? And Yahushua said, somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole, go in peace. Okay, now there's something that happens directly after that, and we know Yahushua followed Torah, so we want to look at why or what happened. There's a key word here that made me think, and maybe it'll make you guys think, but it kind of gave me a different idea of this idea of, can a person touch a person? And does that make that person unclean, or is it the actual thing that is unclean, that is thus unclean, like the blood? So remember, Yahushua in this passage is actually on his way somewhere. And so in verse 41, it says, behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue, and he fell down at Yahushua's feet and besought him that he would come into his house. For he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay a-dying. But as he went, the people thronged him. So then we have the issue where the woman touches him. And in verse 48, it says, and he said unto her, daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole, go in peace. Now this is verse 49. While he yet spake, so there was not a time between this woman touching him, which essentially would have made him unclean if just a person touching a person makes a person unclean. It says, and while he yet spake, there cometh one from the ruler of the synagogue's house, that was Jairus, in verse 41, saying to him, thy daughter is dead, trouble not the master. But when Yahushua heard it, he answered him, saying, fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. And when he came into the house, he suffered no man to go in, save Peter and James and John, and the father and the mother of the maiden. And all wept and bewailed. But he said, weep not, she is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn, knowing that she was dead. And he put them all out, and took her by the hand, so he touched her, and called and said, maid, arise. And her spirit came again, and she arose straightway. And he commanded to give her meat, and her parents were astonished. But he charged them that they should tell no man what was done. So if a person who is unclean touches another person, and that thus makes them unclean, then Yahushua would have been in violation of Scripture by heading to Jairus' house and touching and healing his daughter. So there must be more to it than just, oh, you're unclean so you can't touch anything. It has to obviously do with those things that have already come in contact with the uncleanliness, with the blood. I don't know what other people think about that. I want to throw that out there. I'm not making any definitive statements about that. But what I'm saying is the Hamashiach can't break Torah. And the woman with the issue touched him. He knew she touched him. And it said, while he yet spake, they came over. And he answered, he said, fear not. And he said, and when he came into the house, so he went to the house. It's not put in there that he went and bathed. If somebody knows something else about that, that he went and then bathed, he would have still technically been unclean till even. So we could go back and forth, or if somebody has some more insight on that, I'd be glad to hear it. So the question has to come up, and if we don't have a temple, do any of these things still apply? which is a good question. Everything that Yah set up for us to do didn't always have to do with him ceremonially making us do something, but everything is for our benefit. And so how do these things benefit? As a woman, we know that the time of our cycle is a very, very stressful time. It's a time where we don't want to be touched, or we don't want to be stressed. We don't want to be, we're already emotional. So this time is a time of emotional height. It's a time of spiritual heightenedness. And so this is a time where a separation of any sort causes us to begin to purify. It's a purification that happens physically within our body, where for men it's external. Yah set up our purification to be internal. And it actually has a link to something even greater. Okay, so culturally, the time of separation had connections with other things. So if you look at how the Most High set up the land to rest, everything that is working needs rest. We have a Shabbat, right? But even when there's a Shabbat where the land rests, there's also a sabbatical year where the land rests. The 7th year is a year of rest for the land so that it can be fertile. So that time of separation that a woman has throughout the month is a time that sets her up for fertility. It's not a time that sets her up to be disgusting. It's a time for her body to purify and purge. It's time for her to emotionally purify and purge so that her body can receive the righteous seed, obviously, especially those who are bearing seed for, the house of Israel, allows her to set apart for that time to where she can come back to her husband and be prepared to work her body in order to bring fruit, literally, the fruit of his loins through her body and yield it for the family. So it's a great time. Interestingly enough, a woman, when she is pregnant, no time during her time of pregnancy is she declared unclean. Being pregnant stops the flow, of course, and during that whole time, she is then clean, right? In the sense of her bodily functions. And then there's a time where she is then again separated after the birth of the child, and there's a different separation for the male and female children. It's a completely different video because we're not dealing with that separation, we're dealing with the cycle. I want to point that out. So that 7-day period within a 28-day cycle for most women where they're set apart gives them time for their body to reset and restart. Okay, let's look at what is menstrual blood. It is well known that menstrual discharge not only contains blood, but also the unfertilized egg. Preventing a birth is kind of the same thing as taking a life, okay? So this idea of birth control was not something that was practiced as a thing in our culture. It's more probably for outside cultures, but for Hebrew, we wanted all of our babies. In captivity, we still had babies. So this idea that, the world's so bad, I don't want to have any babies, was not something that was for us, because when it was rough, we had more babies. So preventing birth obviously stops life from happening. I wouldn't say it's the same as death, but it's stopping life from happening. It just is what it is. If a woman does not understand the sacred and spiritual nature behind her cycle, then she will hate it, thus removing herself from the benefits of the process. If we stop looking at this time as a negative and start viewing it as a positive, we can reap the benefits of a physical and a spiritual purification that the Most High has set up for us. The rituals and practices during a woman's cycle, like all of Yah's laws, are for her benefit, or his benefit, but in this case her benefit, and the benefit of the family. By rejecting feminism and embracing true femininity, women are able to appreciate their difference from men. Hating how our bodies function is a replication of the curse that was placed on Eve, in the sense that she would strive to be that instead of embracing and owning who she is. Once we begin to embrace our functions, we can stop striving to be men and embrace being the women that Yah has created us to be. In other words, though menstruation has a capacity to grant purity and free women from from the physical build up in the womb, it also deals with those spiritual things. Our emotions are heightened, which allows us to not only magnify ourselves. I mean, we pay way more attention, probably the most attention we ever pay to ourselves ever during that time, but it also causes us to also pay attention to our spouse and our family, and we get to watch them in a different way. And if we take that time to actually heal mentally and physically, it helps us to better serve those around us in those other days when we're not separated. So why is there rest during menstruation? I know a lot of men don't understand this, and a lot of women probably don't do it, but there should be some form of rest. Now, my husband and I spoke about this, and he made a pretty good point about the fact that a woman not doing anything for 7 days could disrupt the balance of the household. We also talked about the fact that, what if a man had more than one wife during that time? If you want to look into it, I've experienced it. Other women of my family have experienced it. But a lot of times when there are more than one woman in the household, they tend to all have their cycles in sync, which means that, a lot of people will be unclean at the time. So if it was just nobody can touch anything, nobody can do anything, then all the females probably under a certain age would be the only people who would be pure during that time. So does the function of the house stop, or is this something else? Like, in community, things work out a little bit different. Like, okay, sister such and such down the street is on her cycle. Does somebody take over for her family? Those are some areas of research that I would be interested with linking up with somebody and looking at. Because it'd be very interesting if it was she's out, she's in the hut, like some cultures did, for 7 days. Like, was there an older, like a grandmother or someone who was still in the house who took over during this time? Because period pain and some of these issues are real. And to say that women are not tired or irritable in those first few days is just, some people have different experiences, but as a whole, it's very common. I think it's like 1 in 4 women have some kind of discomfort at the beginning of their cycle. So how that was handled and how it would not disrupt the function of the home. Remember, the man is outside of the home in the fields working. So does he talk to his buddies like, hey, my wife is weak, I got to stay in, and do they rotate? So how does that look in community is something that I'm not concrete on, but I am throwing out some of those options for us to think about. One of the things I saw was interesting connections in Numbers chapter 19 between the waters of separation created by the red heifer sacrifice and the Niddah, or the separation created by menstruation. So Numbers chapter 19 verse 1 says, And Yahuwah spake unto Moshe and Aaron, saying, This is the ordinance of law which Yahuwah hath commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel that they bring thee a red heifer without a spot, wherein there is no blemish, upon which never came yoke. And ye shall give her unto Eleazar the priest, that he may bring her forth without the camp, and one shall slay her before his face. And Eleazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger, and sprinkle of her blood directly before the tabernacle of the congregation 7 times. And one shall burn the heifer in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her blood, with her dung shall he burn. And the priest shall take the cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast into the midst of the burning of the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, and he shall bathe his flesh in water. And afterwards he shall come into the camp, and the priest shall be unclean until the even. And he that burneth her shall wash his clothes in water, and bathe his flesh in water, and shall be unclean until the even. And a man that is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and lay them up without the camp in a clean place, and it shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for water separation. It is a purification for sin. And he that hath gathered the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes, and be unclean unto the even. And it shall be unto the children of Israel, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among them, for a statute forever. I want to read specifically that part about the red heifer sacrifice. And how there's a couple of things that are interesting about it. A lot of people deny this idea of what they call immaculate conception that they picked up from the Catholicism, and this idea of the seed of the woman that they say they picked up from Egypt. But the red heifer sacrifice gives us another painted picture of a vessel being used And it gives us the idea of the blood of the Hamashiach being used for purification. Interestingly, this vessel, this bred heifer, is a female, and she has never been yoked. If you look through Jewish writings, you won't find anything. They'll say this is one of those things that even, in the Zohar and other things, they have things that even Solomon couldn't figure out. Well, obviously, it's not figure-outable, because when you stop halfway through a testament and don't get the fulfillment of the testament, or the matching or the side-by-side of the covenant, then you don't see these two things. But the red heifer was a dual. It's a picture of two things. A woman is a picture of the blood, purifies the body to give way for new life. Okay? The red heifer was a consumed sacrifice. It wasn't an eaten sacrifice. Everything was burned with it. And she had never been yoked, which meant that she was, if you want to use it in the term of transferring it to a woman, it would be a woman that had never been with a man. Okay? To see a red heifer would be a great joy, because if you don't know anything about cows, most cows are black. You get some brown ones, but it's a little rare. And a woman being used for the birth of Israel is also a great joy. So then to have a woman used to bring forth through the water of her womb and blood, the Hamashiach, his pure blood then became like the cleaning water of the separation, where her blood obviously is impure. If you guys don't know anything, or if you haven't done any research about that cycle of a woman, I encourage you to, because the blood of a woman does not transfer into the baby. It's a beautiful process. And so while her blood, in the idea of being separated, is then used in her separation for uncleanliness, in this case of the Hamashiach being born of a woman, his blood then is used like the water separation for the purification of the people. Thought that was a really cool parallel. You guys can also dig into that some more once you have download your lesson and look into it. Okay, last thing I want to the last thing I want to point out was why a lot of women, especially the so-called African American or colored women, or women who came through slavery of any type in the Americas, has a negative ideology about the menstrual cycle. I'm going to present to you the reason for this is because during slavery, maturity was a negative thing, not a positive thing. Now, I'm not saying that our younger children did not suffer a lot of these things before their time, but I'm saying it was much more prevalent in the cases of rape and other things during puberty. I believe for a lot of African Americans and people who have gone through slavery in the Americas, that the act of entering into womanhood is negatively looked upon because of the negative actions that would happen during that time period toward women once they entered slavery. So most of the time, and I know it's not all the time, so I'm not painting with a wide brush, but most of the time, a young girl was protected because of her age. But when a girl began to go through puberty, it drew the attention not only of other men, but of slave masters. And mothers knew that during that time that those girls would begin to be raped. And once they were raped, then they would be put into breeding like they were cattle. And so the innocence of a child, of a daughter, was directly under attack. And so I think this negative mental stigma has been passed on generation to generation, so that now when our girls enter into puberty, it's a negative thing. It's met with negativity. Oh, I had a girl when she started this. And it's like it makes you negatively view something that's going to happen perpetually until you enter into menopause. And so every time you get toward that phase, all of these negative emotions begin to happen. And so this is not as much Torah as it is just a cultural thing that I think we need to remedy. And I don't think that Torah speaks against it. But there should be a completely different view about a woman's cycle. She's entering into a phase where she is doing what her body is created to do. In some Eastern cultures, this is met with singing, dancing, gathering of the women to discuss with the young women, you know, what, how to care for herself during this time, to explain to her what we're looking at, which is the time of her separation and what it looks like and how it should be carried out. They give gifts, so it's like you're being welcomed into the womanhood. You're no longer looked at just like a little girl, but now you're welcomed into this new walk of life, and it brings joy, and expectation and a responsibility, because, you know, when girls are younger, mothers and families are protecting their chastity or their virginity, and now it's a time where the responsibility not shifts, but the responsibility of what your body can do and how valuable you are, even more so now, to the family and then to your future husband, are things that can begin to be discussed. I feel like this is something that should definitely be, that a group of women, I don't care, we can do it over chat or whatever, should sit down and talk about of how to implement this with our daughters, because we are carrying so much of the curse of these negative things that have happened to us that we are beginning to hate who we are. We are the mothers of Israel. We are the people who are birthing a nation, and we come from the mother of all living, and we hate the life part of us. Our body goes through a purification, and we need to understand what this is and what's happening emotionally, and be able to openly discuss these things and not continually add negative stigmas to how our bodies are created to function. And as we begin to respect and understand our bodies, and we can then pass that on and teach our daughters how to respect and understand their bodies, and likewise our sons to respect and understand the bodies of the women that they're going to be with, so that we can carry out even the parts of Torah that we might be considering insignificant or done away with. But when the woman is has a positive notion of menstruation in her mind, the girl, then she begins to adjust her own coming physical role, and she adjusts to the physical changes better. All of these, you know, the girls, oh, my daughter's, you know, you hear things like she's feeling herself, or she's this, and it's because so many things are happening emotionally, and most young women don't know how to do them. A woman should understand the proper care of her mind, body, and spirit, and as it is attached to the children that she births, the womb, her husband, her family. Womanhood should be celebrated. It's beautiful. Not worshipped, but celebrated. And when we stop the negative and promote the well-being of our women, then everyone is blessed. Men are supposed to uphold this law, as well as other laws that are directly related to women that may not be directly to their benefit. You know, a lot of the stuff that's being pushed to be upheld in the home are most of the time, not all the time, I'm not saying for all men, but they're most of the time to the direct benefit of the man. You need to submit, you need to do this, you need to do that. But what about the times where it's like, I need to separate, I need some quiet time, I need to pray, I need some time to myself, I need to emotionally heal, I need to, you know, really embrace my purification process. Like, these things are not promoted within our community. And this should be seen by men as a time, not as a time where he can't have sex, but as a time where his wife's body is resting, and she's preparing herself, and her body's cleansing itself to be joined back to him. This needs to be enforced just like every other law, the law of Niddah, or separation. A woman should not feel unwanted or rejected during this time, but honored. So, oh, you're unclean, I'm gonna go sleep with somebody else, or you're unclean, you can't do this, or you're unclean. It's like, it shouldn't be something that is a negative, but it's a time where the family focuses on the mother. You know, everybody talks about this negative stigma of, you know, these pagan holidays and these things, but if we don't ever focus on our women, then you have women who cleave to these things because it's the one time where she gets the attention that she doesn't get. But if we do like scripture says and honor mothers and fathers all year round, even in times where Torah is practiced, then the women are not relying on man-made holidays or man-made days of acknowledgement, but that these things happen perpetually. The last thing I want to talk about is some practices for womb health. Since we're dealing with this idea of purification, I want some of you guys to look up, if you have painful cycles, if you have cramping that's severe or, you know, debilitating, I urge you to look up yoni steaming. It is a practice that can really, really help, especially for women who have not had children, because I've also heard from women, including myself, that after having children, the severe cramping and other things, other discomforts that I had leading up to my cycle have waned quite a bit. So to the point of I don't even have like painful menstrual cycles outside of, you know, some of the discomforts leading up to it, and even those through exercise and diet can be taken away. But in the sense of like even sometimes endometriosis and severe cramping and other things, if you yoni steam, which is a practice of mixing herbs and steaming, can really, really help the womb clean, because some people have an issue with the proper cleansing of their womb. One of the reasons for this, and it is a thing that will get you cut off from Israel, is this thing of having sex while in your cycle. It is completely forbidden. Periods don't get you cut off, but having sex during your cycle will get you cut off from the congregation. It is considered to be an abomination. And I'll give you the verse. It is Leviticus 20:18. If a man lies with a woman during her monthly period and has sexual relations with her, he's exposed to the source of her flow, and he and she are to die. You're being cut off. And outside of the fact that Yah just said so, there are only 2 times during the month where a woman, where the cervix or the womb is open, fully open. And one of those times is during ovulation to allow the receiving of the seed, and the other time is during the menstruation, which allows the flow of the blood. And so this is very important, because allowing impurity or anything into the womb outside of its designated time can also cause some fertility problems. It's very common in our culture. I mean, not saying there weren't barren women, but they practiced different practices that helped reproduction. And so during the time of purity, nothing should be going there. And it's something that's perpetuated over and over again throughout scripture. Another thing is that the Holy of Holies is only entered by the high priest at one time, by one person. And so for that sacrifice, and so seeing that picture perpetuated through the womb is also something to pay attention to. So no sex while in your period. Ladies, I've heard some interesting stories, not from people in Torah, of course, but from other people. And if you are in Torah doing it, you need to stop. The Most High 100% disapproves. It's a time of separation. I hope I answered some questions. Hope I gave you some food for thought. As always, I'm not giving any definitives. I'm not telling people to tell your husbands I can't do anything for 7 days. What I'm saying is this is still in effect for obviously cleanliness and for the reasons set forth in this video. And it should be something that's upheld by the whole household to ensure the mental, spiritual, and physical health of the whole house. Not just the woman, not just the man, but the whole house functions when everybody in the house is properly taken care of during their times. And this is something that I believe the Most High understood, and not just understood, but set forth for us to understand and set in place, because he knows our bodies and understands how we function. So I hope that helps somebody. I'll put the link to download the actual the Hebrew words and a little diagram in the comments. And if you have further questions or have some insight on the information that was put forth that wasn't conclusive, I would love to hear it, and I would love to share it with the women here. All right, so as we move throughout our month, I hope that some of these things are put into practice. Also, I just thought about something. I'm also going to post a link to podcasts. I have a podcast on self-care. And so it deals with some of this stuff in a little more detail. And if you want to listen to it in podcast and hear some of this, you're more than welcome to, and I'll post the link. All right.
Royalty. Royalty. Powers of the chosen people.